Well, hello, everyone. I'm James Dobson, and you're listening to Family Talk, a listener-supported ministry. In fact, thank you so much for being part of that support for James Dobson Family Institute.
Well, welcome to Family Talk, the broadcast division of the Dr. James Dobson Family Institute. I'm Roger Marsh. Let me ask you a question. What does it mean to pass hope on to others? Is it by helping to bring someone a meal, or babysitting for a single mom who just needs a break? Perhaps it's helping someone who can't help themselves. The late President Ronald Reagan once said, "We can't help everyone, but everyone can help someone." Imagine a world in which everyone would do something to help one another. Well, over the next couple of days here on Family Talk, we're going to hear a previously recorded interview about a ranch that is changing lives, not only for the young attendees, but also for the lives of the horses that call it home. These episodes have been some of Dr. Dobson's most listened to programs over the years, and if you've not heard them before, you will not want to miss the next 3 broadcasts here on Family Talk. Now, I must advise you, some of the stories shared are difficult to listen to, and they may not be appropriate for young listeners, so parental discretion is definitely advised. Now, this place of healing and recovery we're talking about is called the Crystal Peaks Youth Ranch. It was founded in 1995 by Troy and Kim Meeder. The ranch reaches out to children and horses that have known abuse and neglect. The mission of the Crystal Peaks Youth Ranch is to restore children and horses and give them hope for a bright future. Troy and Kim Meeder have over 50 years of combined experience in this mission. Troy serves as Chief Operations Officer of the CPYR ministry, as well as an author. In 2011, he released his first book called Average Joe. Kim Meeder is the author of 6 books, including Hope Rising, Revival Rising, and Encountering Our Wild God. Kim also serves as Chief Communications Officer at the Crystal Peaks Youth Ranch. Both Troy and Kim are accomplished communicators and travel nationally to speak at conferences, churches, and other venues to spread the message of hope. So now let's join Dr. James Dobson and his guests, Troy and Kim Meeder, for this classic special edition of Family Talk.
Troy, you came last time when we did the broadcast with Kim, but you were not here in the studio, and I think
Correct.
It's about time you joined us.
Yes, I agree.
And fortunately, now you are able to work on the ranch full time.
To be there every day to see the kids and the horses and such.
Well, we haven't really explained what kind of ranch it is, but the essence of it is horses and children. It is abused horses for the most part. That maybe nobody else wants, and you take them. And it is children who have been abused, and some of them are disabled, and most of them are wounded.
Yes.
And you bring them to the ranch, and somehow magic occurs. It's not magic at all. It's a touch from the Lord.
It is.
And bonds those children with the horses, and they both get well. That's a marvelous thing. Explain it, Kim.
I think that the healing that we see happen between the kids and the horses happens in part because they've lived parallel lives. Many of the horses that we have rescued are horses that have suffered in very, very similar ways to the children that come to the ranch. And the kids and the horses know intuitively that they understand each other perhaps better than anyone can understand either one of them.
What is there about horses and children that are therapeutic to each other? I know that that's true because I've seen it in other contexts. But what is there about the two that bonds them together?
I think about that a lot, and perhaps one of the only explanations I have is that Psalm says that all creation shouts the glory of God. And I think horses do that with a voice that we don't hear with our ears. And I think that children do that so much better than adults. That Jesus said, that you need to come to me like a little child because kids are so intuitive, perhaps on levels that sometimes adults lose as they grow older. But you're right, we have seen horses be able to reach out to children in ways that adults are not yet allowed, and vice versa.
Does it not break your heart to see these kids who have been sexually abused or physically abused, and they're wounded and they're hurt, and they don't know who they are and don't think anybody cares for them or love them. And then you see these horses that are the innocent victims that have not been fed or have been beaten and who knows what horrible experiences. How do you cope with that emotionally? Because every case is its own tragedy, isn't it?
It is. And I think it would be easy to be swallowed by that. But we serve a victorious Lord. And I think that it depends on where my focus goes. If my focus goes on the pain and the suffering, I think I would fall down every day because I don't think you can not be affected by pain and suffering. But if we focus on Christ, all of a sudden we look down and we're walking on water. And He's the one who gives us what we need to keep going forward.
Kim, when you were here last time, I think the first story began with your having written about angels in horsehair. And that was the beginning of your book, Hope Rising.
It was.
And I read it, and it was very, very emotional. Rather than my reading it again, tell us about that story.
I'll try. The kids that wish to come and ride at our ranch, usually they need an appointment to make sure that we have a horse and a leader available for them when they come. And I remember one particular day that the ranch was in full swing and all the kids and leaders and horses were all being used and just this big halo of dust rising over the ranch. And I remember a counselor walking up the driveway with a very small child. And she came unannounced, and she came and asked me, is it okay if I bring him here today? And I said, of course it's all right. And I looked down at this little boy, and my first impression of him is that his skin was just too big for who he was. He was just lost in his own skin, and he was so broken. Without speaking any words, you could just feel sorrow emanating from this boy.
He'd been through tragic circumstances, hadn't he?
I could feel that, yes. And I asked him, I said, Adam, she had already introduced him as Adam, and I asked, honey, have you ever ridden a horse? And he just looked at the ground and just somberly shook his head no. And we had one pony that was not in use at the time. And I asked him, would you like to ride a horse today? And he looked up at me with this look of just complete disbelief that he would get to do something like all the other kids. And I told him about this golden pony that we had that was behind the arena, just waiting for him to come and spend time with him. And in that moment, he flashed a little grin to me. And I think from anyone else's perspective, that would have looked like a very normal moment. And yet, from my perspective, I was just horrified at what I had just seen. And he had run ahead and gotten a halter and was running back to where this pony lived. And I looked at his counselor and I said, is that what I think it is? And she was so angry she couldn't even speak. And we just walked side by side for quite some time. And finally, she looked at me and she said, Kim, it is so much worse than you can imagine. Not only has the father, the man who is supposed to love and cherish and protect his son, smashed out all of his teeth with his fists. He gets drunk and he has him run around in the yard and he shoots at him with a rifle. It's a miracle this child is still alive. When Adam had smiled at me, I could see that all of his teeth, top and bottom, had been broken. And so we brought the pony out and together we groomed him, and I would stand over him. He was so little that I could easily stand behind him and put my hands over his hands, and we would brush and we cleaned the hooves together. And Adam was grooming the pony, and we finally came to a place of saddling the pony, and I had my hands over his and I was showing him how to put the bridle on. And I showed him exactly what I wanted him to do and exactly how I wanted him to hold his hands. And then I let go and I just took a few steps backward, and I really wanted him to have this little victory that he did it all by himself. Yeah. And he stood there for just a moment all alone, just contemplating what I had asked him. And then all of a sudden this pony did something I've never seen any horse do before or since. And he just swung his nose all the way around this child so tightly that Adam couldn't move. He was trapped between the pony's neck and his shoulder. And the pony just held him. And Adam, I looked at him and he rolled his eyes upward and backward to look at me, and I could see that he was afraid. Yeah. And I didn't know what the pony was doing. I'd never seen him do this before or since. And I just blurted out, oh my gosh, Adam, I think this pony's giving you a hug. And you could see his little eyes just bouncing back and forth, trying to process this, that something in this world would care to love me. And I could see his face start to relax, and the pony was still holding him very tightly, and he wriggled his arm out, and he had his hand up on top of the pony's neck, and I could hear him whispering, "He likes me. He likes me." All to himself, "He really likes me." And then the pony started to relax and released his hug. And Adam put his arms around the pony's neck and was scratching him. And he started saying it louder and louder, "He likes me, he likes me." And he turned around and he looked up at my face and he said, "He really likes me," and gave me this
couldn't believe it.
Beautiful, jagged grin. It was a golden moment in one of the beginnings of our ranch.
Well, there are golden moments every day for you all.
Truly.
You have how many horses now?
26.
26,
yes.
And where have you gotten them?
You know, we get them from every situation that you can think of. Not every one of them was in a poor situation. Some of them came because it was just the right place to be. And they are truly angels in horsehair. God works through them every day. And we love them like our own little family.
Is it common for a horse to take to a child like this?
It is. I think that there is a difference with children, because I think that children perhaps allow their innocence to lead them more than adults. And with horses, back to children, a horse cannot lie. It can only tell the truth. And these kids know that this horse doesn't judge, this horse doesn't gossip, this horse cannot make fun of you and how you look or what you're wearing. This horse just loves because it chooses to. And the kids know that.
Would the word intuitive be relevant to horses?
Absolutely.
In that
Every moment of every day.
Absolutely.
So they can sense when a little child is wounded and hurting.
Horses have far more intuition than we ever thought possible.
There are so many stories that come out of your ranch, and that's what you've put in your 2 books, and they just captivate you. I mean, you can't put the book down once you get started reading. And there is one that I would like you to share called Teva and Angela. Tell us what happened there.
I love to share this story because the Lord uses this and has used this in my own life and in others' lives, that suffering has a purpose. It's not just a random thing that happens when God's back is turned. That our suffering has a purpose. I remember one day, not long ago, an incentive group of girls had come up the driveway to our ranch, and they were all girls who were failing school. And they were brought to as an encouragement for them to finish school. And of these young women, there was one who I could just feel sorrow emanating from her. And she was very, very small for her age. And I thought, I'm going to work with her. And I introduced myself, and her name was Angela. And she was very, very small. She said she was 15, but she looked like she was maybe 11. Just a very, very small, very beautiful Hispanic young woman. And we have all the kids help us do a little chore before they ride. And in her broken state, I thought the only chore that I would wish for her to do would be to help me groom a horse. That she's up for brushing, and that was about it. And so we brought out this very short, older mare, and we were standing shoulder to shoulder, and I started to ask her a few questions about, you live with your mom and your dad? Just your mom. And she said, well, I used to live with my mom, but we got in a fight and she kicked me out. And so I moved in with my best friend, but her husband tried to have sex with me, and I knew that was wrong. And so I left, and I'm living with another couple right now, and And I know that they don't really want me. I just don't know what I'm going to do.
She's 15.
She was 15, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, Lord, I don't even know what to say. What was I worried about when I was in high school? It sure wasn't being homeless. And I just blurted out, honey, what about your dad? Can you go live with your dad? And I saw her have this physical reaction that just went from the ground up like a wave through her body. And she put both of her hands on top of the horse's back to steady herself. And I thought, oh, dear Lord, whatever's coming out of her mouth next is going to be huge. Lord, I need some wisdom right now. And I saw her just take a really deep breath, and she kind of steadied herself, and she looked straight down, and she said, last year, my grandmother and my father and both of my brothers were murdered. And so I'm not going to be living with him anytime soon either. And I felt like I had just been steamrolled. And God, I don't even know what to say. And I could hear his voice. Child, yes, you do. Yes, you do. And I said, honey, I'm so glad that you're here today. And I'm so glad that out of all the people on the ranch that you would get to be with me. I feel so blessed that we're together. And I'm really glad that you're with me, because I think that out of everyone here, I believe that I'm the only one that can look you in the eye and say, you're going to be just fine. And this is how I know. And I had a perfect opportunity to share with her the love and truth of Jesus Christ and how his hope is extended to us every moment of every day. And all we have to do is reach out and take his hand. And God will use our suffering. 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4 says that God's going to give you his comfort in your time of need, so that when others go through the same thing, you can give them the comfort that God himself gave you. And so our pain has a purpose, which doesn't always seem like it when we're going through it, but if we can just hold on.
Kim, that is very relevant to your personal history.
It is.
Because you've had a lot of pain in your life, too. And in this book, A Bridge Called Hope, you talk about your father taking you on a walk up the mountain. It's where you learn to love nature and to love the outdoors, which you love as much as anything on earth. And he walked with you up the mountain. Tell about that experience and what happened afterward.
I remember at a very young age, my dad was the same stature as you, and I remember putting my hands in the back of his 501 jeans and just holding on, and he would tow me up these mountains. And I remember the very first time of sitting on top of a little volcano in Northern California, and I remember looking down, and it was as if the whole world had turned to stone, and it was very windy, and we were sitting with our backs against the stone wall, and just thinking, oh my goodness, heaven can't be more beautiful than this.
You were 5, you said.
I was
in the book.
5 at the time, and that set into motion a love of the wilderness that is deep within my heart to this day.
But you lost your father
I did.
And your mother not too long after that.
It wasn't long after that. As many families today, divorce is just a prowling monster in our society that seeks to divide and destroy. And my parents were in the midst of going through a divorce. And I loved my dad very much, and in many ways I think he was an excellent father. And in other ways I think he was a very, very broken man. And there came a time where I can only ponder that his thought process must have been along the lines that if I can't have a family with her, then I don't think anyone else should either. And sadly, there was a time when my dad took my mother's life and then took his own. And so it was not an accident, unfortunately.
Were you close to him?
I think as close as a 9-year-old can be. You know, that's still when your dad's the greatest dad in the whole world, and he has a cape and he flies, and you live in the castle of his love. Your dad can do no wrong in the eyes of a 9-year-old. And so I loved my dad very much, and do to this day.
How were you told that you'd lost both your parents?
I remember being picked up at my grade school by my dad's best friend, and we drove in silence and picked up my two older sisters. And on the long drive out to my grandparents' house, nobody spoke. And during that drive, all of us were crying to ourselves, and all of us knew that they were gone before we got there. And I remember walking into my grandparents' house, and someone was trying to hug me and tell me, your father's just shot your mother and then took his own life, and just fighting against them. And I remember breaking away and running out the back door and just trying to run away from this horrific truth. This can't be true. It can't be true. And I just remember running in a child's effort to just run away from the unthinkable. And it was in February, and I was running through this orchard that had been plowed, and all the trees were fallow and brown. And I remember just falling down in the dust, and just, it was like hearing it from a great distance away, just screaming and realizing that's my voice. And I just started screaming, Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. And in that moment, I know that the Lord of all knelt beside a broken child and took a hold of my hand, and he has never let go. Never.
Kim, that is so relevant to the work you're doing now, because the empathy that you have for hurting children comes right square out of that, doesn't it?
The comfort that Jesus Christ has given me is the very comfort that I give to the kids that come to our ranch.
In some ways, you are they now.
People ask me all the time, what would drive you to write a book about hope? And someone long ago invested hope in my life, and my life was saved because of it. And that was my grandmother.
Oh, Mimi?
Yes.
Oh, I tell you what, I want to hear about Mimi when we start the second program. We want to talk to you again next time. Troy, you have to be proud of this lady.
She brings me to tears all the time. I'm sitting over here trying to wipe them away as she's talking. I'm very proud.
She had a vision for a ranch, for a ministry, for a way to help. She took what she had, and she let God use it to reach out to these children who were so desperately needy. And you have stood beside her. It's a pleasure to put you back on the air and to let our listeners know about this wonderful ranch and ministry. And I hope there'll be many other people that help you. Your ranch is only 9 acres, 9.2 acres, you told me.
Correct.
And it's kind of rocky. It's not the most beautiful place.
That's a very polite way to say it.
And you know what? They need a bigger ranch. And I hope there's somebody out there that might help provide it for them.
Thank you.
The Lord knows, and the Lord will provide. But we're out of time for today. I just want you to know how much I appreciate you, not only being here, coming all the way to Colorado Springs, but for the work that you do every day for
Thank you,
those,
Dr. Dobson.
those little children. They're in such need and desperation.
Yeah.
And you have found a way to put salve on the wounds, and you do it through these wounded horses.
They bless our lives.
It's a great concept, and I love it. And I thank you for being here and sharing some of your stories. I want to hear some more of them next time.
To God be the glory.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It is truly amazing how the Lord has provided for the Crystal Peaks Youth Ranch. What a powerful story indeed. We've been listening to the first part of a classic trio of programs featuring Dr. James Dobson and his guests Kim and Troy Meeder here on Family Talk. If you would like more information about the Meeders or their ministry of the Crystal Peaks Youth Ranch, visit drjamesdobson.org/Family Talk. And if you enjoyed today's impactful conversation, be sure to tune in again tomorrow and then again on Wednesday for the remaining 2 parts of this interview. Here at the Dr. James Dobson Family Institute, we aim to walk alongside you along your faith journey, no matter which season you're in, whether you're just starting out in your faith or you've been walking with the Lord for quite some time. For years, families have found daily direction and inspiration from the writings of Dr. James Dobson and his wife, Shirley, especially their best-selling devotional series, Nightlight for Couples and Nightlight for Parents. Both of these books contain practical and biblically based lessons that are now available on video as well. If you'd like to check them out, simply visit drjamesdobson.org/marriage-parenting to watch them. Again, that's drjamesdobson.org/marriage-parenting. And then you can watch them there. I'm Roger Marsh. May God continue to richly bless you and your family as you grow deeper and stronger in your relationship with Him. And be sure to join us again tomorrow for part 2 of our powerful conversation with Troy and Kim Meeder, right here on Family Talk.
This has been a presentation of the Dr. James Dobson Family Institute.